We spend a lot of time in Excel selecting data for a lot of reasons. Maybe we're going to format it, maybe we're going to move it, copy it, maybe we're going to use it in formulas. So I really want to spend a few minutes talking about some really efficient ways to select data. So we'll start out using the mouse to select data. So I want you to take your mouse and click right in the middle of a cell. See the fat white plus sign? Mm-hmm. And then just click and drag down and over a little bit. Good. Now a couple things about this. First of all, this is what we call a cell range. Anytime you have multiple cells selected, that's a range. Mm-hmm. Take a look at the range we have selected right now. What's the upper left corner?
A1.
Excellent. And what's the lower right corner?
C2.
And that's how we would identify that range, A1 to C2.
Okay.
Good. Take your mouse and just click and drag over a few other cells. Now, most people learn how to select cells that way. I did. That's how I always worked in Excel for a very long time. But I have to tell you that it's really not that efficient. Oh. What if you had to select maybe 100 columns here? That would take you a long time to select.
It would.
What if you had a lot of rows? That's going to take you a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you some additional ways that I use to select cells. First of all, why don't you just go ahead and click in cell A1 again. If you want to select just a couple of cells, we're going to use our Shift key and our arrows. So when you hold down your Shift key and then you arrow down a few cells, see how it selects those.
Okay.
And then, of course, you could go to the right, left, up, and down, and that's going to select a range pretty quickly.
I can see that. That's cool.
Another way that we're going to select is a combination of the mouse and the keyboard. So go ahead and click in cell A1 again. And we're going to hold down the Shift key. Now, we're not dragging. We're just going to hold down the Shift key. And then I want you to click in B10 where you see the 25th of December. So you'll notice that it's selected between the two clicks.
That's a lot quicker than pressing Shift and Enter.
One of the reasons I like this method is, let's say that I decided I needed to change that range right now. So I'm just going to hold down the Shift key, and we're going to click, let's say, in C6, where you see Independence Day observed. See how it just changes it without having to start all over again?
Okay.
Go ahead and just click in a blank cell if you would. I'm going to show you one of my favorite ways to select in Excel, and we're going to use it two ways. So first of all, we're in a blank cell. I want you on the keyboard to hold down the Control key and use the A. Control A. And of course A for all. That's going to select everything.
Okay.
There is another way to do the same thing. If you look over in the corner above the one to the left of the A, see the little square with the half triangle on it? Mm-hmm. If you click there, that's also going to do the same thing. That's a great trick, and Control A works almost everywhere in Windows, so that's definitely one you want to know. But to be honest with you, I don't select everything a whole lot in Excel. That's actually pretty rare. Mm-hmm. So let's just click in a cell, and I want you to try Control A again and tell me what happens.
Oh, wow. That was very easy.
Isn't that great? Mm-hmm. So we've only got a few cells here, but let's say you had 100 rows and 50 columns. That's going to select the entire range. And how did you do it?
Control A. Don't
forget that one. You absolutely want to remember it. It's worth taking just a minute and talking about why Excel selected those cells. Mm-hmm. In Excel, it's always looking for blank rows and columns when it looks for a data set. So whatever cell you clicked in, it looks left, right, up, and down, and looks for a blank row or a blank column. When you insert a blank row or blank column, that tells Excel, my data stops here. Mm-hmm. So you have to keep in mind that when you use Control A, that's what it's looking for. No blank rows, no blank columns. Now an empty cell's okay, but blank rows and columns are a pretty big deal in Excel, and we'll talk more about those later.
Okay.
Control A is great if you want to select the entire range, but what if you just wanted to select a column of data? And again, there's two ways we do this. One way, if you want to select the entire column, is to click on the letter. So why don't you click on the letter of one of those headings?
Oh, wow, it just selected the whole column of A.
And when you say the whole column, that's the whole column, 1,048,576 rows, right? Mm-hmm. So make sure that's what you want when you click on that heading, which again is not going to be a lot. It's going to be a little rare that you're going to use that. Okay. If you click on a number,
it selects that whole row.
and that's going to be out to column XFD. That's the whole thing.
Okay.
If I wanted to select a couple of rows, several of them, you have two options. You can click and drag with your mouse. So you could take your mouse and make sure it's that black arrow. Do you see the black arrow on the number 3?
Mm-hmm.
Just click and drag right now. Drag down. You can select multiples.
Mm-hmm.
You can also use the keyboard shortcuts that we talked about earlier. For example, if you hold down the Shift key and use your up and down arrows, then that's going to let you change that selection as well. And that'll work for the columns, so you can select multiple columns at once. Sometimes you don't want the whole column, you just want the data in the column.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I want you to do. I want you to click in cell A1. And we're going to combine two tricks here. So the first trick is, what if I want to go to the bottom of a column? We're going to use the Control and the arrow keys. And this is going to be one of your favorite tips. So this is one you want to remember. We're going to hold down Control, and I'm going to do the down arrow. See where that takes you?
Oh, straight to 10, A10.
Exactly, the last data cell. Now I'm going to do this again. Watch carefully.
Whoa.
Whoa is right. We're down at the very last row. You know we're not going to scroll back up. Nobody's got time for that. So I'm just going to reverse that, and I'm going to do Control and an up arrow. And notice it takes me back to row 10, and if I do it again, it takes me back to the first row.
I like that. Now, would this also work going left to right?
Exactly. So why don't you hold down the Control key and hit the right arrow, and notice that it takes you to column C, which is the last data cell. And then if you do it again, since we have no more data, of course, we get to see column XFD, that last column. So again, we're not going to scroll back to the right. We could do the Control left arrow, but what's another way to get back to A1?
You can hit the home key.
You're exactly right. Excellent. Or if I were anywhere other than row 1, I would do Control home. Now we're going to put together some of the tricks that you've learned, because we went to the bottom of the column, but we didn't select that data. So here's what we're going to do. And again, this is one you're going to want to remember. We're going to be using it all the time. We used Control down to go to the bottom. We're just going to add the Shift key to select it. So Control, Shift, down arrow.
Oh, wow.
That's how we select data down to the bottom of a column. So whether it's 10 rows, 100 rows, 1,000 rows, 50,000 rows, it doesn't matter. That's going to take you straight to the bottom of the column.
Oh, okay.
And if I wanted to select all my headings, maybe, we have 3, maybe I have 30, maybe I have 300. I'm just going to do Control, Shift, and the right arrow, and that's going to select all my headings.
Now, I just have one question. Do you have to have information in these cells?
That's
Correct.
exactly right. I'm
Okay.
glad you mentioned that, because remember, it's always going to stop where it finds blank cells. For, say, the column headings that I just mentioned, you're never going to have a blank one. Every column will have a heading. But going down, you're right, you may have some blanks, so you may have to keep hitting your down arrow a few times.
Okay.
And then one other nice feature, and this is new in 2019, is when we select the cells, we may want to actually be able to deselect them. So what we can do is go ahead and hold down your Control key, and why don't you click on President's Day and then Memorial Day, and you'll see how it allows us to deselect those cells. So we can use Control to both select non-adjacent cells, but then also to deselect cells. So one nice new feature that you can do now is, if you select all these cells, for example, and then realize that you really don't need the ones in the middle, instead of having to start all over again and use that Control and Shift like we've talked about, you can actually just hold down your Control key, and let's just click on President's Day, and then we'll click on Memorial Day, and you'll see that it allows us to deselect cells as we go. So we can use Control to select, but we can also use Control to deselect. Alexa, I know I showed you a lot of shortcuts for moving around and for selecting cells. Don't worry, we're going to keep reviewing them in the next few lessons, so you'll get a lot of practice in learning them. And I'm going to show you a few more shortcuts as we go along, because everybody loves shortcuts in Excel.